Hi, this is Eva from the blog thecharmofit.wordpress.com, and I'm here to talk about my knitting again because it's been 2 weeks since my last video. Today is a rainy, cloudy day, so hopefully there's enough light and it won't look too grainy. But I love this kind of weather, so it's perfect fall weather. I am wearing a hat and mitts. Ooh, there goes the light. That I made with a skein of Malabrigo Arroyo, I believe. They're sport weight. It's in variegated purples and blues. Ooh, and I designed, I guess, them myself. I found a stitch pattern that I liked from knittingfool.com. She's got a stitch dictionary, and then I used Ann Budd's directions for the beret. And for the mitts, I just made them up myself. I wanted to try out, every other pair of mitts I've made has an actual thumb gusset, and I wanted to try out just putting a hole in so that I could easily push them up if I wanted to knit or do the dishes and stuff. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to make mitts useful for me. So that's why the thumb is a little unfinished. It was really easy. I just knit a few rows flat and then switched back to knitting in the round. Anyway, I was looking for a stitch pattern that would kind of break up the colors a little. It's not striping nearly as much in real life as on the camera. So it's a kind of garter stitch rib lace thing. It's really pretty. I think it's one of the florets. So, and then I did the crown decreases, trying to work with the lace as much as I could, which was really fun. I ripped back a few times. Okay. Thistle is about to leave, but I'll introduce her first. So this is my dog. She's a little terrier that I adopted as an adult from petfinder.com. A few years ago because I wanted a lap dog and I don't have the energy to deal with a puppy, so I wanted to know exactly what type of personality I was getting, and that's what I got. She's a fabulous dog. I will definitely be doing rescue for all my future pets. Speaking of whom, you can just see my cat's ears. She's in the little blanket fort on the bed. She blends in well to my comforter set, and I just got her in April, also from petfinder.com and another rescue group. And she's also a little love who likes to sit in my lap and sleep, and she and Thistle get along really well. The cat's name is Moth. Anyway, if you follow my Instagram, where I'm also the charm of it, you've seen many photos of them. I'm like the crazy pet lady, but that's okay. Okay, did you want to get down? No, you're good now? And I'm drinking some chai today because last time my throat was getting a little hoarse. I suddenly realized why the video podcasts that I watch have people sipping from their mugs a lot more frequently. Helps keep your voice limber. So, first we will talk about finished objects. Unfortunately, quite a few of what I've finished I can't actually show you in the video because my mother came to visit last week and I had done a few gifts for my family, and she took them all back to Texas with her when she flew out because that would save me on shipping costs. So I'll tell you about them and I'll include photos in my post. I made sure to do a photo shoot the morning before she left. I always forget that, and then I have like no photos of gifts. Anyway, so I finished up my dad's mittens, and they turned out really nicely. I've since seen photos of him wearing them, and they look like they fit really well. I ended up sewing that conductive thread in that lets you use your smartphones without taking your mittens off, and my dad was super excited about that. So I got it 2 spools of 30 feet each from Amazon for $9, I think, and it barely took any to put the one thumb in. He only wanted it on his left thumb. I sent some more home just in case he realizes that it's useful to have some other fingers and thumbs. Anyway, so I'll be trying that out in future gloves and mittens. Let's see, then really quickly I whipped up for my sister a seatbelt cozy. This was at her request. So she has a really long commute. She drives for an hour and a half each way to her work, and apparently the seatbelt was giving her a rash. So I used some leftover Barocco Modern Cotton, which is a cotton rayon blend that I had left over from a little baby ensemble thing I did for one of our friends. And she requested a dragonfly on it, so I found a free pattern for a dragonfly washcloth on Ravelry, and I just knit that up. I put quite a few eyelet rows in, I think 2 on top and 2 on bottom, and a little bit of ribbing, so hopefully she'll be, and I sent the leftover ball of yarn home with her so she can use as much yarn as she needs to secure it to the seatbelt. She's going to report back, and I told her I'm happy to re-knit it with some changes or knit another one. But yeah, that's what she requested. And the final finished object that I can't show you, but I wish I could, is the little litter of bunnies that I did for my niece. I made her a large rabbit in August, I believe, and I mentioned that I had some leftover yarn, so she might get a baby bunny or two. And then she reminded me a couple weeks ago, here you go, baby, that Coco, that's what she named the large bunny, is in fact pregnant, and she was wondering when Coco might have her baby, so that reminded me. And I got to knitting. I mainly just used up scraps. I made 2 more in the same Malabrigo chocolate brown yarn that I'd used for the big rabbit. And then I did one with some leftover cream Malabrigo. They're just natural color that I had left over from the skunk she requested for Christmas last year. And then some random black yarn. A little bit of the really light gray from Quince in their Lark, their worsted weight, Frost. And so that made 6 bunnies, and I prefer odd numbers, so I decided I really wanted a 7th, so I ordered some yarn just from a Ravelry D-stash. It's Knit Picks Reverie. It's 80% baby alpaca and 20% acrylic, and it's brushed. Here, I can show you if you don't mind a spoiler for stash. Woo! It's so soft and fuzzy. I cannot even begin to describe. This is like the perfect stuffed animal yarn. I was actually a little concerned when it arrived that it would make all the other bunnies seem not soft anymore, because yeah, this is like magic. Anyway, so I knit up one final one in that, and then I finished them all. So I'm not particularly skilled at stuffed animals. I use Sarah Elizabeth Henry, I believe. Hang on, I kept up Ravelry this time. Sarah Elizabeth Kellner. The pattern is called Henry's Bunny. It's a free pattern. It uses about 20 to 30 yards per little bunny. They end up about, they're like palm sized. Anyway, so her patterns tend to have a lot of shaping built into the knitting, so then when you put the stuffing in, they look like animals. One of the other stuffed animal patterns I tried, a whale, you were supposed to stuff it to look more whale-like. I have no skill with stuffing. My dad finally took it from me before the baby shower and fixed it for me because I was so fed up with this whale and I could not make it look good no matter what I did. So I am not a huge fan of knitting stuffed animals. I find it a bit fiddly. I don't see the point of knitting all these tiny little pieces and then seaming them together if I could just sew a stuffed animal out of felt. But this, so I'm telling you all this because this pattern, the Henry's Bunny pattern, I love. The reason I knit 7 is because I was having such a good time. It's pretty much made all in one go. You do break the yarn a couple of times, but you don't have to weave in ends with a stuffed animal. And you only have to do one tiny little seam at the top of the head at the end. And there's really clever short row shaping. And then if you want, you can make little front legs and seam them on. I did this time, but in the past I've left them off, and the bunnies look cute either way. So yes, for stuffed animal novice, it is definitely very good. It's very user-friendly. I have found all of her patterns are. I've made quite a few of her patterns for my niece now because both I enjoy making them and my niece really enjoys the final product. I have some homemade chai here so that my voice won't get as hoarse as last time. Suddenly I understand why all those video podcasters drink. Anyway, so those are the finished objects that I cannot show you because they went home. I do have a few that I can show you. First up are my Deck the Hall socks. This was the House Targaryen socks on Ravelry. It's a free pattern, and it's one of those patterns where basically it gives you the texture stitch and tells you to do your preferred heel and toe and all that, which is fine with me. It's not as bright a red as it's showing up. Let's see if we move it. I wanted you to see the texture because when it's stretched, I think it looks like Christmas ornaments. But let's see. Yeah, it's a truer color back here. So there are my finished socks. I modified the pattern a little in that rather than have the stitch pattern go all the way to the toes, I did a little triangle thingy for the toe, just because I felt like it. And I don't know, it kind of reminded me of Christmas trees. So I had a good time knitting those, but I've gotten used to knitting with thicker sock yarns because Quince Finch, even though it's 220 yards to 50 grams, is much plumper, and so is Tern. And so the Ultra Alpaca Fine is quite thin by comparison, so these socks felt like they took a really long time, even though they didn't. But I really like the finished result. They're cozy and comfy, and I knit them at a pretty tight gauge. I haven't measured it, but I was experimenting with holding my yarn tighter, so I'm pretty sure it's between 9 and 10 stitches per inch, which I really like. I like the thicker yarns at 8 stitches per inch, so thinner ones I want to start knitting more tightly because I just think they're comfier for the bottom of my feet. My other two finished objects are hats. They're both for me, so I'm going to model them for you. First up is, I'm in a group on Ravelry called Folktales and Fairy Tales, something like that. And their current theme is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which has been one of my favorite stories. My mom read it to me from her Norn anthology when I was like 8 or 9, and I loved it. So I've enjoyed it ever since. I've read a few translations. This time I reread it on audio, the Simon Armitage translation. Anyway, so Sir Gawain in the poem, and apparently it's Gawain in Old English and Gawain in the French tradition. So that's why I'm saying Gawain. I was also listening to the Tolkien professor has one of his classes. He does podcasts for some of his classes, and one of them had a few episodes on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So that's where I learned about that. I highly recommend that podcast, by the way, if you're into fairy tale kind of stuff, or Lord of the Rings, obviously. Anyway, Sir Gawain, when he starts off on his quest, he's given a shield, and it's described as having a pentacle on it, or a star, which represents 5 virtues: piety, chastity, chivalry, and I'm not going to remember the other ones. But so for the crown, I wanted a pentacle like the shield. You can kind of see it. Okay. Ooh, yeah. So, oh, this is hard in reverse. Okay. Woo. There we go. Can you kind of see the star? These are the points of the star. So for this, I used a free pattern on Ravelry called the Kananda beret. And it's designed to have 6 repeats, so obviously it wouldn't make a star. So I just took out one of the repeats to get the pentacle on the top. And then for the brim, the pattern is just written with a standard brim, but Sir Gawain has a lot of Celtic influences, so I really wanted a kind of braided brim. And so I found a braid from my Twisted Stitch knitting book, and I knit it flat until it fit my head. And then I Kitchenered the ends together and picked up around and started knitting the hat. This was my first time doing a hat this way, and I really liked it. It's really easy to tell if the brim fits you right away instead of having to try it on after you've done the ribbing and then be sad that you have to rip it out. And it makes a really comfy hat. And yeah, so I'm really pleased. Okay, so this is the same green that I used for my dad's mittens. It is not black. I apologize for the lighting today. It's like a deep forest green. About there, only with less green. And it is Quince & Company's Owl, which is a worsted weight woolen spun 50-50 wool alpaca blend. The wool is American wool. The alpaca used to be American alpaca, but in the new batch, it's New Zealand alpaca because Quince couldn't get consistent quality with American alpaca. Anyway, it took, I don't know if it even took a skein, and the skeins are only 50 grams. Yeah, so it took 52 grams. So the leftovers from my dad's mittens and another skein. But that means that I've still got quite a bit left over because when I ordered the yarn, I ordered 3 skeins. I thought my dad's mittens would take more. They took less than 1 of each color, which is surprising because my dad has really big hands. Like when I tried them on, they were oven mitts. I think woolen spun yarns go really far. And obviously I knit it at a kind of looser gauge for the hat. I did the brim tight so that no wind gets in my ears, but I didn't want the hat to feel like an oven. So that's hat number 1. Hat number 2 is, oh hello hair, the leftover brushed baby alpaca, and I just finished this last night, so I was in love with this yarn as I knit it, and I really like the color too. And since I had quite a bit of the skein left over, I decided to knit myself a hat. Since it's baby alpaca, and this is the Knit Pick Shrubbery, it's a worsted weight. Here it is. So since it's baby alpaca, sorry, itchy nose, I was a little worried about it stretching out, so I started with an I-cord cast on. So first you do I-cord around and then you pick up stitches to, you know, stop the stretchiness, and I think that's going to work really well. Only time will tell, but for now it feels really secure. And then for the brim, I didn't want to do any kind of ribbing because this yarn, it's brushed and it seems to be happiest in stockinette. But I wanted it to look a little different, so I did half fisherman's rib, which is a brioche stitch. I've never tried brioche knitting before. I'm not actually sure that's how you pronounce it. And I haven't blocked this yet because I just finished it last night, so I'm not sure if it'll even out, but it has a certain rustic charm, as it is. And then I did another, so I did an I-cord decorative touch on the end of the brim. I'm sorry, the brushed yarn apparently is going to go up my nose. Anyway, so I did an I-cord bind off, and then I repicked up for the body. And since I was just doing plain stockinette, I did a spiral crown at 8 points, yes, because I read somewhere, oh, the Math for Knitters podcast. I did not read. I heard that 8 decreased points gets you the roundest hat. And for the numbers, I used Ann Bud's basic tam recipe, but I've decided not to block this as a tam or beret. I'm going to leave it because I like how it's a little bit of a Saatchi beanie, but it also looks a little bit like a bonnet to me. Vaguely. Maybe I'm imagining that. But all of my other hats are berets, so the fact that I like this one as a beanie-ish thing means that I'm going to leave it that way. So I plan to knit some matching gloves, but I'll talk about that more when we talk about stash acquisitions. Okay, it's not actually that cold today, so I'm going to leave the knit accessories off for the rest of the talk. Okay, those are all the finished objects. Works in progress. Another pair of socks, of course. This is, the red socks were for the solid socks knit along. The theme this month was red. And meanwhile, the Sock Knitters Anonymous, they also have monthly themes. This month, you had a few choices, but you can, there's like a designer, a theme, and a technique. And I did the theme, which was underappreciated patterns, so you had to use a pattern that fewer than 15 people have knit. So mine, I used the Rusted from the Rain by Anja Freihube. I think she's German, but I don't speak German, so Anja, I apologize if I just butchered your name. Anyway, it's a really nice pattern. It's a simple texture stitch. I just wanted something kind of straightforward for the brown socks, and it spirals around the leg. You can't see it as well in the video. That's funny. In real life, it's really obvious. The purl stitches, hang on. Oh well, they spiral, I promise. You'll be able to see it in the photo. I've always enjoyed cloudy weather, but next time I'll wait for a sunny day to record. So I wanted something in a simple texture stitch that I could make sure fit. And I needed some brown socks because I wear a lot of brown shoes. So I ordered Quince & Company's Turn, which is their wool silk fingering weight in Barnacle. And I really like it, but it's a very, very cool brown, which I like. But I've realized that my shoes are a much warmer brown, so I'm probably going to end up knitting another pair of brown socks in another couple of months, because I have a feeling these are going to clash. Kind of like I don't tend to wear my gray socks with my gray Oxfords because the Oxfords are a greenish gray, and my gray socks are more in the blue purpley gray department, so they don't get along very well. But that's okay, I can wear these with all my other colored shoes. And I've got a pair of brown loafers that are a similar color. Anyway, so this is a really easy to memorize pattern. It's a 6-row repeat over 6 stitches, which is the minimum for Sock Knitters Anonymous. I believe the designer originally designed them for a different challenge for her. And it makes a lot of intuitive sense, so I pretty quickly didn't need to look anymore. And I liked the ribbing pattern that she has you do is really nice as well. We could pick our own heels, so I did my usual Eye of Partridge heel flap. And I have just finished the gusset decreases. So now I've just got the foot of the sock to knit. I wear size 6.5 to 7 shoes, or Euro 37-ish, so I don't have to knit a sock for very long before it fits. I was reading Sock Architecture. I got it from the library, which is by the Math for Knitters blogger. And she mentioned that if when you put your shoes on you have a problem with your socks slipping up, you're probably knitting your socks a little too long. So with the red socks, and I have that problem, and I just assumed it was because, you know, hand knit socks are a little thicker. Anyway, so with the red socks, I knit them a little shorter than I usually would because, I don't know, I don't want my toes smushed, so when I'm deciding, I guess I tend to knit a little long. And they do not get smushed at all in my shoes. So from now on, I will be stopping my sock a little earlier. And if I do decide to go back and fix them, almost all my socks are knit top down, so it would be a pretty easy fix, although I would have to pull out the Kitchener. I really enjoy grafting, so redoing it wouldn't be a problem, but pulling it out is not terribly fun. Okay, so that's that. I only started these, let's see, what's today's date? The 24th, so I started this 5 days ago, so I might finish them by the end of October, but the Sock Knitters Anonymous monthly knit-alongs actually run for 2 months, so no pressure. Except, of course, you always want to start knitting your next pair, right? Let's see. My worsted weight project was my hat that I finished last night, so I don't have a worsted weight project to show you, but my kind of medium weight. My scarf is progressing. I think I just started this in the last video. It is out of Pearl Soho line weight, which is their heavy lace, light fingering weight, single ply merino yarn. And I'm really enjoying knitting this. It's the Anya scarf, which is on Ravelry. It's a garter stitch lace pattern, and it's quite fun. At this point, I've memorized it. Still got a lot of yarn left. Oops, sorry. So the pattern has you do, there you go, you can see, alternate sections about this long with the big triangle sections, but I decided I like the open work a little more than the triangle, so I'm going to do all open work until I get to as much yarn as it took for me to do this section, and then knit a section like this. So basically it'll be all open work, and then at the ends they'll each have a triangle, a diamond, not a triangle. I like the diamond when it's held up like this, but it tends to get lost. I think I'm knitting it at a slightly firmer gauge than the designer would suggest. There wasn't a gauge in the pattern, but since I'm knitting it English style, I don't knit as loosely with that, and I'm knitting it on, I think these are size 5s. But yeah, so we'll see. I tend to go really slowly with lace and scarf projects. I'm not sure why. Maybe that's just a typical thing, but that's not a bad thing. It costs less the slower I knit, so I'm really looking forward to the finished product. Teals are some of my very favorites, so it'll be nice to have that to wear once winter sets in. It's actually the first scarf I've knit for myself, so I don't have much neck wear. And then my other work in progress is my cardigan, my Melusine cardigan. This has undergone some drama since I last spoke, but I'm currently working on the first sleeve. And I've gotten to the point where I've done my increases and I just need to knit straight until the sleeve cap. And I did just a little pattern and it'll sit on the outside of the wrist, assuming that I seam the sleeve into the right side. Okay, so let me tell you about the drama. Here is the body of the cardigan. And last time I had all of these pieces blocked, but I had not seamed them together yet. And I merrily started the first sleeve and was working on that, and I still hadn't seamed them together. I'm gonna knit while I'm talking. And so then I got to the point where I needed to do the sleeve cap for the first sleeve, and I decided to go ahead and seam the body together, and I noticed then that the armholes were looking quite low, like they sat down here. And I was like, uh-oh, but I thought to myself, well, maybe it will look different once the sleeve is in place. So I knit an entire sleeve cap, fitting the deep armhole, and I seamed it in, and it was so bad. Oh my goodness, it looked very bad, and not only did it look very bad, but my arm had limited motion because it was just way too low, and it was completely my own fault because I've been using Ann Budd's basic cardigan pattern from her handy book of patterns, and I'm kind of doing a mashup, but I'm looking at the 32 and the 34-inch bust, although really I'm using it more for the yoke shaping, and then I do my own waist shaping. Anyway, and these are under her children's chapter, not her adult sizing chapter. So somehow I got it in my head that because I'm a grown-up, I should have longer armholes than what she recommends for the 32 and 34-inch size. Even though I've knit 2 other sweaters using her basic templates as kind of my launching point, and both of them have worked fine with the suggested armhole length. I don't know what I was thinking. And then this was compounded because I was switching. It's a freshly wound cake of the of the frogged yarn, so it's fighting me. Anyway, this was compounded because I was also switching the directions from bottom up to top down. And when you're knitting bottom up and it says, when you're knitting bottom up, you do the armhole shaping, the decreases, and then it said knit to 8.5 inches or whatever. Well, if you switch that to top down, you shouldn't knit to 8.5 inches and then start the armhole shaping, right? Because that's going to end up longer. So between those two things, I needed to take 2 inches off the armholes. So I pulled out the book. Oh no, I'm not going to be able to remember it. Oh, I was just talking about it too. Man, the Something Knitter. It's got all these great suggestions for sweater projects. It'll come to me. Anyway, so I pulled out this book, and one of her suggestions was to try doing some short rows right in here. And she warned that it might look strange, but it's pretty quick, so you can always pull it out. So I tried that, and it looked terrible. Not to mention, since it looked longer in the body, the waist shaping was hitting me too low, and since the waist shaping is quite tight, too low looks a little strange because obviously then it's no longer hitting the smallest part of my body. So I realized that I could just pinch it up at the top and that would fix everything, except I knit the pieces from the top down, so I could not just pull out the bind off and frog it. Instead, I had to cut my pieces, and I started with the front because obviously the front pieces were easy. My neckline will just be a little higher than I had planned originally, but still it won't be eating my neck or anything. Anyway, so the front pieces were quite easy because I just had these little straps. And then I went to the back, and I got quite lucky here because the 2 inches shorter that I needed covered a full medallion. I don't know what I would have done if I needed to cut in the middle of a medallion. So, but since I was afraid to just chop it off, I snipped one stitch from one side, and then I had to unravel stitch by stitch, and it takes like 2 pulls for each stitch, all of the stitches across the back. And the twisted stitch panel, of course, was even more fun to unravel because that yarn had been moving around. It took an hour and a half to unravel all of it, and almost all of that was in the back. I mean, the front pieces went quite quickly. And so then I had live stitches on my needle, and I had to reknit the neck shaping so that the back of the neck would be a little higher, and the shoulder shaping because obviously shoulders slope. And once again, that went very quickly for the front, but for the back I had to kind of make it look organic. So I ended up doing a little twiggly bit the way that I did down at the bottom, and hopefully it looks pretty normal. I'm quite sad that, well, not quite sad, I'm a little sad because originally it was supposed to start with these lovely little twirly bits, and now it stops in the middle. But that is a minor consideration compared to the medallion in the center. So I'm back on track for that, and now dun, 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 the armholes are in the appropriate spots. Woohoo! So, and while I had it tried on, I went ahead and I used the safety pin style stitch markers to pretend they were buttons, and it looked really good buttoned up, even though the shaping is unusual for a cardigan. So I'm very pleased with that. And the waist is fine too. I know I mentioned last time that it looked freakishly small, but knitting is very stretchy, and the smallest point of my waist is pretty small, so. Yeah, so after, and you know how you get that feeling when you know there's something wrong with your knitting, and so then you just don't really want to think about it for a few days? That's pretty much what I did with the armholes, like that vague sense of dread, so you're like, no rush. So that's why I'm not further, I don't have any further progress, is because I finally tackled that issue just a few days ago and fixed the body. I was afraid it was going to take a lot more work. And then, of course, I had to pull out the whole sleeve cap that I had knit because then it was too long. And while I was ripping out, I decided that I'd done a few too many increases on the biceps. There was some baggy fabric, which I didn't really like. So I ripped back even further on the sleeve, and it's a little short now. And then I had to wash the frogged yarn because I had blocked all the pieces, so the yarn was really, really kinky, and I was afraid that if I knit with it as it was when I blocked it, it would relax and have a different gauge and look funny. So I had to wait for it to dry, and now I finally caked it up today and have begun knitting again. So once I get to the correct length, I will have to figure out the new sleeve cap, and then I'll be able to knit a second sleeve, seam them in, and finally finish up the neckline and the button bands. I feel like it's been taking forever, but I actually only cast on a month ago for the gauge swatch, so really it hasn't been that long at all. I think it was just the days of dread made it feel like it was a bit longer. There was a knot in my yarn. So that's that. Those are all of my works in progress. It's kind of funny to be knitting 2 turn projects at once, but that's okay. The sleeve should go really fast because it's just plain stockinette in the round, so I can do that while I'm reading or talking with people or riding the bus. Basically, I can do it because I don't have to look. So it shouldn't take too long. I really enjoy having that kind of knitting. So yeah, that's what I'm up to. As I said, I plan to cast on a new worsted weight project later this afternoon, some gloves. But now I suppose we should talk about stash acquisition. I'm going to take another sip. Look, we're already at 35 minutes. I guess I won't need to add any features today. Okay. So this is the Knit Picks Reverie, that brushed baby alpaca in the color Porcini. And I ordered one ball from D-Stash, and it arrived, and I loved it. And then I noticed that there was another Ravelry member D-Stashing 3 balls, and I got a little greedy because I really like the color. So I ordered the other 3, and I do not regret it. They were quite reasonably priced, and I'm sure they'll keep me nice and warm. So I've already knit the hat. I'll be knitting a pair of gloves. The hat took barely any yarn. I didn't even finish the skein that I'd already knit the baby bunny from. So I think because, you know, baby alpaca, you don't want to knit it at a super dense gauge because otherwise you'll overheat. So depending on how much I have left with my gloves, I'll see if I can do one of those little scarflets. And if I don't have enough yarn for that, then I'll probably use some of it for more stuffed animals and figure out something to do with the rest. It's so soft, fluffy. Oh my goodness. And so you should know now that I got a little enthusiastic in my yarn shopping over the last 2 weeks. And this also came from D-Stash, but this is not for me. This is for a Christmas present that I will not talk about because it's a Christmas present for someone who is internet savvy. Anyway, it is just the Cascade 220 Heathers in Pumpkin Spice, which is an orangey brown. It's kind of halfway in between orange and brown. It's a little, yeah, I think it's showing up pretty accurately. I'm sorry I keep cutting my face off. This is the wall, so. But yeah, so I guess I can't really talk about it, but I'm really excited about what it's for. And we'll see how I manage that with Instagram, because this person is also on Instagram. And then the final D-Stash order that I placed was for me. And it's for, I'm going to do a hat, gloves, and scarf set. So pretty much all of my hats tend to be casual or rustic or, you know, that kind of thing. So I was really missing a dressy set because sometimes you just want to look nice. And I was enjoying knitting with the Pearl Soho line weight yarn so much that I decided I really wanted to try the Quince single ply heavy lace weight, which is called Piper, and that I wanted to make my set in light gray because gray goes with everything for me. And with the color card, I really liked the color Abilene, and then it turned out someone on Ravelry was D-Stashing 4 skeins, so she had already wound this one. Isn't that interesting? It's like a UFO. Anyway, I'm so excited about this. So it's 50% mohair and 50% merino, and both the merino sheep and the mohair goats are all Texan. So this is the colorway Abilene, which is a pale gray with kind of pinky purpley undertones. I'm very excited about it. There we go, that's accurate. And 4 skeins means I have about 1,200 yards of it to play with. I like stole style scarves, the wider ones, so this should be able to let me do all of that. I've already got plans for I'll probably start with the hat. But yeah. Just like that, I will wear it. Sorry, I think the chai is sugar's getting to me. Honey, actually. So, I'm clearly quite excited about this. This was basically my treat. Instead of getting another sweater's worth of yarn, I decided to do a hat, glove, and scarf set because even though I wear my sweaters quite often, I wear hats and outdoor accessories even more. I don't have a car. I get around via bus and walking. And I live in the snow belt of New York State. So I wear a hat daily from November through March. And almost daily in October and April. And depending on the weather, even sometimes in September and May. So that's a long time to wear hats. That's a good 6 to 8 months of the year. So they get a lot of wear. And since I don't have any dressy ones, I just thought it made more sense, especially since I'm kind of torn on what type of sweater I want to knit next. So I thought I would just enjoy my current sweater stash and knit the plans I have for that, and then see how I feel in a few months about what to knit next with that. And finally, something that I did not get on D-Stash One of the things I enjoy about knitting is that there's so many different types of yarn and so many different types of sheep breeds. So I like to try breed-specific yarn, and it's important to me when I buy yarn retail instead of on secondhand by a Ravelry that it is produced in a kind of ethical, both socially and environmentally manner. Which is a long way of saying that the next breed-specific yarn I've decided I want to try is Shetland. And I actually already had a few of these. Sorry if you can hear the crinkling. So I had already gotten these via D-Stash. Here we go. We'll just keep them back here. I'll stop trying to send them to you. And I knew I wanted to do some kind of colorwork hat, but I was worried that I wasn't going to get the right amount of contrast. And then I was flipping through Alice Starmore's Fair Isle book, and she has a beautiful tam. Of course, there's no pattern, but inspired by a patch of wildflowers. And it has these kinds of colors with green contrast. So I ordered a green, and then she's got little pops of yellow and different colors of green and a little bit of purple. And unfortunately, Shetland is a bit expensive in the US, Shetland yarn. It's sold in 25-gram balls, and each one usually runs about $6, which makes it almost double the cost of Quince's yarn, because I can get Quince fingering yarn. It's what, 8 something on their website for 50 grams. So that's double. So it's kind of a luxury yarn. And with color work, if you want to do little bits of different colors, then you're kind of stuck, right? But I found a website called The Feral Knitter, and she sells the Jameson line. And not only does she sell full skeins, but she sells little baby skeins of 20 yards each. And I was very excited because this meant I could get a few to add some pops without kind of breaking the bank. So I got a yellow, like in the Alice Starmore. I got another green, because one of the things I really love about Fair Isle knitting, which I have not done it before, is the way that there's subtle color changes and how frequently they are and how many of them are tonal. So, and then I got 2 purples. They're both quite bluey purples, but we'll see. So I don't know how many of these I'll use in the hat, but I thought it would be fun. And then while I was ordering, it was the same price for shipping, up to $40. So I decided that before just jumping in and designing my own tam, it might be nice to knit one from a pattern first. And I've been in love with the Winter Forest tam, which is a free pattern on Ravelry since I came across it a really long time ago. And I really love it in the colors that it's done. So I've never knit a pattern in the yarn and colors called for, but I decided to just go ahead and get them. So, oh, and I'll probably use some of this for the other tam I'm going to do anyway. So these are Storm, Granite, and one of the white colors. I think I might have picked a different white because I liked that this one was marled. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. The other thing I love about these Shetland traditional yarns is that they've all got tons of different colors in each of them. I am a subtle colored fanatic, so I really love all of the heathers. I think the pinks aren't heathered, but they're pretty anyway. Well, they're kind of, but not in the same way. Prettiness. Anyway, so I got big ones of these 3, and then a little one because it looked like it would be enough of the contrast. I believe that the designer actually used the other Shetland line, the one that I've got the D-Stash from, which is Jameson and Smith. And so she gave equivalent colors, and hers looked a lot browner than this. This looks like a darker version. See how close they are? So that puts me in a bit of a quandary, because now I've read a few projects, and they do mention that if you're using Jameson's, this is not the best color substitution. So I haven't decided yet if I'm just going to go ahead and order a skein of a more brown color, or I've got a little bit of Harrisville Shetland, which is not a Shetland yarn, that's just its name, but it is a similarly woolen spun, rougher fingering weight, and it's a brown color, and I've got about 20 yards of that left over. So if I use this for some of it, there's a line of pine trees going around right at the beginning that's against the light background, so it wouldn't matter quite so much that these two are very close. So I can either do that and then use the leftover Harrisville for the crown, where it does matter, or I can just go ahead and order another brown and just, you know, pay more for the shipping. But it, you know, I could get at least one more skein for the same shipping price, and I would hate to not be satisfied with my hat at the end. And I really do love the designer's hat. But on the other hand, that's starting to get a little bit expensive for a hat. Maybe there will be enough yarn left over for a matching pair of gloves. I'm not really sure. I haven't used this yarn before, so I have no idea how far it usually goes. Anyway, but that dilemma aside, I had like $4 left to get to my $40 before the shipping change, so I just threw in 2 more mini skeins for fun. A really dark charcoal gray, which is, it's not black, it's a little lighter than it's showing up. Because I thought it would be a good contrast. I have to pay attention to contrast because I tend to go for colors that are lower contrast together, but I've noticed in color work, knitting, the higher contrast is usually better. But of course with Fair Isle, a lot of times they do the subtle ones, so maybe it depends on what type of color work you're doing. Anyway, and then I got this, which is Cardinal, which is a beautiful scarlet color. There'll definitely be more of this in my future. I would call it a more blue-red than actual cardinals, but that does not disappoint me because I love these kinds of scarlet reds. So those are my yarn acquisitions, and a few of my future project plans, and I've now been talking for 45 minutes, so I think that that's more than enough for one episode. Thank you for listening, and I will be back in another 2 weeks. Bye! Oh, I should tell you, I am the Charm of It on Ravelry and Instagram, and my blog is thecharmofit.wordpress.com. I'm uploading to YouTube at this time. My last 2 were uploaded to Vimeo, but it seems like most knitting video podcasters use YouTube, so I thought I would switch over there. And you're welcome to follow me or friend me. I'm still sort of getting used to the social aspects of Ravelry, but I am really enjoying connecting with knitters both there and especially on Instagram. So I always welcome more conversation about knitting. Bye!